A $3,000 failure in personal finances has just completely escalated. It's now a full-scale political and ethical crisis.
And it's tearing open the books on what sources are calling a culture of entitlement.
Exactly. A culture of donor cash mismanagement and, frankly, profound hypocrisy among Washington's most vocal political faction. This isn't just about a forgotten utility bill, not at all.
No.
We are diving into a systematic examination of spending receipts. And these receipts, they reveal luxury hotels, private security details, extensive chauffeur services.
All funded by the very voters these representatives claim to champion.
While their own basic personal obligations just go ignored. The scale of the financial questions here. It spans from a few $1,000s in unpaid debt all the way to the shadow of a $1 billion fraud network.
It's an incredible scope.
So if the public trust is truly being tested, and if accountability is finally back on the table, we have to uncover the full story. Stay with us as we break this down in our in-depth discussion right here on News Focus Podcast. And if you find our reporting valuable, please hit the like button and subscribe to support our channel. We truly appreciate it. Welcome to this deep dive. We're opening up this whole stack of source documents that detail the extraordinary financial scrutiny that's now surrounding this controversial political faction.
And it all starts with one specific, almost unbelievably minor financial detail.
It's amazing the number is $3,047.
Right. $3,047.
Right. $3,047. That's the precise amount of an unpaid, matured lien sitting on Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's luxury condo in Dallas, Texas.
And it's so important to start with that specific number.
It is, because it's the catalyst for everything that followed. For a politician earning a significant salary, $3,047 is not a hardship amount. It just isn't.
Not even close. And according to the county record cited in the source material, this wasn't some simple momentary oversight that was, immediately corrected.
This was something that festered.
It did. This debt, which sources strongly suggest is an overdue homeowners association fee, or maybe a substantial fine from the condo community, was allowed to go unpaid for months.
And crucially, the debt didn't just sit there as an outstanding bill, it legally escalated. So for our listeners, could you explain what it means when an HOA debt or fine matures into a public lien on a property?
Sure. So when an HOA, or any creditor really, places a lien on a property, it moves from being a simple personal debt to a public legal encumbrance on the asset itself.
So it's officially on the books.
It's officially on the books. It signifies that the property owner, in this case the Congresswoman, has failed to meet a basic financial obligation for a sustained period of time.
Wow.
And now the creditor has a legal claim against the property itself. This is a severe step.
It sounds it. What can happen?
Well, it affects your ability to sell or refinance the condo. And if it's left completely ignored, it can eventually lead to foreclosure proceedings, though, that takes considerably longer.
But the very fact that it progressed to a public filing, that means that official legal warnings were ignored, right? Or the debt was disputed without any resolution for a long time.
That's exactly right. Either way, it shows a failure to handle a basic administrative task.
And this is where we get to the core friction point, which the source documents just hammer home. It's this stunning discrepancy between her very public, very loud demands for justice and accountability,
right,
and this quiet, verifiable failure to handle her own most basic personal financial obligations. How are the sources analyzing that gap?
The analysis really centers on the issue of credibility. Public servants are held to a higher standard of transparency and fiscal responsibility. It's just part of the job.
Even in their private lives.
Especially in their private lives, when it becomes a matter of public record. The argument presented by the sources is pretty simple. If an elected official is unable or unwilling to manage a straightforward debt of a few $1,000s,
yeah,
a debt that results in a public legal filing,
yeah,
how can the public trust her to responsibly steward vast amounts of taxpayer money or to craft complex financial policies?
It's a fair question.
The failure here isn't just financial, it's a failure of management that becomes a political liability. And it's especially damaging for someone who relies so heavily on a platform of, moral rectitude.
And that political liability wasn't just the debt itself, it was her response when the debt became public.
Oh, that was something else.
The moment reporters pressed her about this unpaid lien, the source material describes an immediate and, an aggressive reaction.
That reaction, which went viral, was arguably more damaging than the lien itself. It really was.
How so?
She did not offer a simple, transparent explanation. That's the common political strategy, right?
Yeah.
You neutralize these minor issues You get ahead of them.
It was an oversight. It's been paid. We're moving on.
Exactly. Instead, she exploded. That's the word used in the sources. She immediately pivoted to defense, accusing the journalists who broke the story of twisting stories, and suggested that anyone interested in this detail had a right-wing obsession.
And the most stunning part of that whole exchange for me was her assertion that the public didn't deserve to know the details of her personal finances.
Exactly. That line was just breathtaking. The source analysis views this as an attempt to shield herself from legitimate public scrutiny by conflating public interest with a partisan attack.
Which is a classic move.
A classic move, but it didn't work here. While certain details of a representative's finances are private, a public lien on her primary residence stemming from months of non-payment is, by its very definition, a matter of public record.
And legitimate journalistic inquiry.
Absolutely. Her posture, which was described as defensive, dismissive, and ultimately evasive, it just instantly raised the stakes. Sources noted this looked like panic that was just poorly disguised as anger.
So if we analyze that strategic failure, the choice to lash out instead of just offering a simple clarification, what was the immediate consequence on the political stage?
Well, the consequence was catastrophic in terms of narrative control. A minor explanation, I missed the payment, it's being settled today, that would have extinguished the story instantly. Poof, gone.
It would have been a one-day story, if that.
If that. Instead, by resorting to accusation and, frankly, arrogance, her reaction poured gasoline on the fire. It turned a clerical local issue into a national political scandal about accountability and public trust.
And for her rivals, and maybe more importantly for her own colleagues, this was a profound strategic error.
It confirmed the whole narrative of financial chaos. It was a completely unforced error.
So we have the initial point established, a fundamental failure of personal fiscal responsibility, leading to an aggressive and damaging public reaction. But this just sets the stage for the next and maybe most critical finding in the source material.
This is where it gets really bad for her.
The profound contrast between the debt she neglected and the spending she facilitated.
And this is where the story truly shifts from a simple failure of management to a narrative of genuine hypocrisy and entitlement. And that's something that resonates very deeply with voters.
It's the question everyone started asking.
Exactly. What was she doing with money when she couldn't even pay her condo bill?
And the discovery was just stunning. While that $3,047 lac sat unpaid, public filings revealed that Congresswoman Crockett was simultaneously documented as burning through over $75,000 in donor money.
$75,000.
Let's break down the nature of that spending, because it's not, general overhead for running an office.
No, not at all. The receipts that are detailed in these filings, they're highly specific, and they focus intensely on personal comfort and, luxury.
Such as?
We are talking about luxury hotels, extensive high-end travel accommodations, significant spending on private security details, and recurrent dedicated chauffeur transportation.
Specifically, black car services.
Yes, specifically black car services.
So when the source material refers to this as indulgence pure and simple, what guidelines are they referencing here? How do we legally distinguish between permissible campaign travel and, outright personal luxury?
It's a great question, and the distinction relies on established campaign finance guidelines, which are primarily governed by the Federal Election Commission, the FEC.
Okay.
And the core ethical test is often called the beard test, though the FEC doesn't use that exact term. It basically asks, would this expense exist even if the person wasn't running for office?
Okay. That's a clear line.
It is. If the answer is yes, then it's considered personal use, and it cannot be paid for with campaign funds. So if a representative uses campaign funds to pay for luxury travel, high-end hotels, or constant private chauffeurs that are not clearly tied to official campaign events or constituent service.
Or, I suppose, a legitimate security need?
Or a legitimate documented security need, yes.
Yeah.
Then it crosses the line into personal benefit.
Can you give us more detail on those categories? For instance, chauffeur transportation, is that ever permissible?
Oh, absolutely. It depends entirely on the justification. Using a black car service occasionally for travel to the airport or to official events in Washington, D.C. is, typically permissible.
But that's not what we're seeing here.
No. The source material focuses on the extent of this, spending tens of thousands of dollars on these high-end services in a relatively short period. And that suggests it went far beyond standard constituent travel and leaned much more toward a lifestyle preference.
Right.
If she was flying first class and staying at five-star hotels when coach or, standard hotels were available, That expenditure has to be justified as necessary, either for security or for efficiency. That's critical to her political function.
And when these receipts surface alongside an unpaid personal debt,
It creates an unmistakable perception of using donor money as a personal luxury fund. There's just no other way to see it.
and that figure, $75,000 being roughly 25 times the value of the unpaid debt, that becomes the central element of the outrage.
It does.
This is money that was donated by her constituents, often small dollar donors, who believe they're funding political activism and change.
And that is the crux of the betrayal, according to the analysis. The sources note the irony is just overwhelming.
How so?
She is demanding justice for the marginalized while accepting campaign donations from those very people, and then using that money to fund what the sources are describing as a lavish lifestyle.
Including five-star experiences and black car services.
It just screams entitlement. The optics suggest that while she may be championing the cause of the average voter publicly, her personal and financial priorities are completely disconnected from the concerns of those who are struggling to pay their own HOA fees.
And the expert analysis seems to draw a straight line here. This contradiction is what took the story from a minor issue to a major scandal.
Absolutely. If she was living frugally, the Lynn might have been dismissed as just an accounting error, a simple mistake.
But the extensive luxury spending.
It provided the necessary context for voters to feel a genuine, betrayal of trust.
So the so what factor here just becomes massive.
Huge. It's no longer about her managing $3,000. It's about her demonstrated judgment handling the public's resources.
Right.
The sources argue this chaotic approach to her own finances severely compromises her ability to function as a trusted public steward. This isn't just a monetary discrepancy, it's a profound credibility gap. And that has become the defining feature of this phase of her career.
Which brings us to the next critical phase of our deep dive, demonstrating that this isn't an isolated incident.
No, not at all.
As soon as the Crockett spending became public, reporters and political analysts immediately started connecting her financial chaos to a much wider discernible pattern within her specific political faction.
And that transition from an individual failure to a systemic pattern is the reason this story has such political velocity. It just took off.
So it's not just a Jasmine Crockett problem.
No. The sources were very quick to label this a squad financial culture problem, suggesting the issue stems from a systemic disregard for the appropriate use of political funds within that specific group.
Let's start with the first, most direct parallel that was drawn, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib.
Yes.
What specific financial actions led reporters to immediately draw these comparisons?
The source material explicitly points to Ladibi's history of extensive spending on ground transportation. It's almost an identical issue. Yes. Reports indicated that Tlaib had spent tens of thousands of dollars on luxury limousines. And again, we are talking about high-end black cars and full, dedicated chauffeur services, all charged to her campaign and committee funds within a single year.
So can you detail the nature of those funds and the controversies surrounding Tlaib's justification for that spending?
Well, Tlaib's spending often utilized funds from her political action committees and her campaign accounts. And the controversy arose because the expenditures just appeared disproportionate to the stated campaign needs, especially for ground transportation in her home district.
So similar questions were raised.
Identical questions. Critics allege, just like in the Crockett situation, that the level of service and the expense indicated a luxury preference rather than a strict political necessity.
So the shared trait between Tlaib and Crockett
Is that both utilized donor cash, given for political purposes, to fund what sources have characterized as extravagant personal travel expenses. It's the same playbook.
So the pattern recognition here is critical. You have two highly visible members of the exact same faction demonstrating the same tendency for what analysts are calling financial recklessness with donor funds.
That's right. And that's what signals a cultural problem within the group, rather than just an isolated error from one person.
And the defensive reactions also mirrored each other, didn't they?
They did. When Crockett was pressed on the similarity of her spending to Tlaib's, the reports say she snapped hard.
That immediate aggressive defense.
Rather than a clear differentiation or a justification, it suggested to analysts that she recognized the truth in the comparison. When you see these specific types of financial scandals aligning so perfectly across members of the same ideological subgroup, they stop being coincidences.
They become evidence.
They become evidence of a symptomatic issue with financial stewardship.
And just as this narrative was solidifying, forcing the entire faction to address the optics of luxury spending, the focus suddenly shifted.
It did. It shifted to a scandal of a completely different scale.
And this dragged Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's district into the conversation.
The context here is geographically and financially just explosive. This involved the discovery of a sprawling, organized $1 billion welfare fraud network.
$1 billion.
$1 billion. And it was operating primarily within Omar's district in Minnesota. The sheer size of this scheme, involving federal child care and nutrition program funds, is staggering. It dwarfs the scope of the Crockett and Tellub spending issues.
Now, to maintain our impartiality here, we need to be very clear on the specific distinction that the source material draws regarding Omar's involvement.
Absolutely. This is crucial. The sources strongly emphasize that there is no allegation that Congresswoman Omar orchestrated the fraud or was directly involved as, a ringleader. That is a critical distinction.
So the analysis focuses entirely on what?
On the optics and the questions raised by the timeline. This was a massive, organized, years-long scheme that was finally uncovered by federal investigators.
So what are the crucial questions being raised by that timing?
The question being posed by political rivals and, concerned citizens is pretty straightforward. What did Omar know, and when did she know it?
Because this was happening in her backyard.
Her political backyard. This was a billion-dollar criminal enterprise targeting federal funds intended for vulnerable populations. And it was happening right under the nose of a representative who is intensely focused on community issues.
So the optics are just terrible.
They're terrible because it suggests either a profound lack of community oversight or a failure to detect or report the warning signs about major criminal activities happening right there.
So if we synthesize all this, we have three elements converging at once.
Yes.
You have Crockett's unpaid Lynn and her luxury spending. You have Tleib's documented limo expenses. And now you have Omar's district as the epicenter of a massive organized fraud investigation.
The cumulative effect is devastating to the faction's brand. It just is. It creates a picture of financial chaos that is spiraling across multiple dimensions.
And it makes Crockett's situation look less like an isolated mistake.
And more like one symptom of a wider pattern of mismanagement and a pervasive lack of necessary oversight within the specific political environment.
So whether the issues are small, like personal debts, medium, like campaign luxury spending,
or large, like a district-wide billion-dollar fraud, the common thread is a failure of accountability.
And for Democratic strategists watching this cascade of bad headlines, this collective failure leads them immediately to one place.
To what analysts are calling the ghost of Jamal Bowman.
Explain that.
This precedent is the absolute worst-case scenario that is driving the current internal panic within the party. Jamal Bowman was heralded as one of the faction's untouchable rising stars.
He was supposed to be the future.
Absolutely. And his primary defeat serves as a brutal object lesson in how quickly voters will reject perceived chaos.
Let's detail the specific trajectory of Bowman's collapse, because it wasn't just one incident, was it? It was a pattern of perceived erratic behavior.
That's right. The definitive turning point, the moment that really symbolized the chaos, was the incident where Bowman pulled a fire alarm in a congressional office building during a critical vote.
And then he gave these increasingly implausible excuses for his actions.
Right. And while the fire alarm itself was a misdemeanor, it became a lightning rod for all the preceding criticisms that had been building up.
Because critics had already been targeting him over a sustained pattern of ethics issues, credibility gaps, and what they saw as highly chaotic leadership.
Exactly, including specific questions about his use of social media and his overall approach to governing.
So the voters in his district, they didn't react solely to the fire alarm.
No, they reacted to the cumulative effect. They saw a consistent, frustrating pattern of erratic behavior and questionable decisions that created an environment of, leadership chaos.
And in the end?
In the end, the source material notes, voters decisively rejected him in the primary. It resulted in a wipeout that sent shockwaves through the entire party infrastructure.
And it proved a very important point.
It proved that perceived ideological purity does not protect a candidate from electoral consequences when it's combined with a persistent lack of institutional seriousness. Voters have a limit.
Now, we connect that precedent directly to the current situation. Strategists are terrified because they see Crockett staring at the exact same trajectory.
The fear is palpable. The sources indicate that the Democratic establishment fears the electorate has just lost patience. They're tired of what they view as political theatrics, especially when it's combined with a demonstrated lack of basic financial conduct.
So they look at Crockett's viral meltdown.
Her meltdown, the documented luxury spending, the unpaid debt. And they see the same cumulative effect that sank Bowman.
A politician who prioritized image and drama over effective, responsible governance.
That's the narrative that's taking hold.
So the critical question now being whispered behind closed doors, and this goes far beyond just Crockett, is Jasmine Crockett the next Bowman?
And that is the strategic nightmare for the party. Strategists recognize that this confluence of financial scandals is transforming the entire faction into a political liability.
A liability that threatens to damage every Democrat running, particularly in vulnerable districts, leading up to the 2026 election cycle.
That's the fear. The smell of chaos, when you combine it with evidence of financial entitlement, becomes a powerful negative narrative that can actively drive down voter enthusiasm and support for the entire party slate.
So the stakes are not just her seat.
Yeah.
It's the viability of an entire political subgroup within the Democratic Party structure. And this threat of widespread political damage forces us to examine that critical phase where the narrative control battle began.
Indeed. When the story first broke, the defense mechanisms were immediately deployed.
By both her political allies and certain segments of the legacy media.
Yes, the attempt was clearly to contain or completely bury the narrative before it could gain any traction.
So let's look at the specific talking points that were used by her allies in the media. How did they try to minimize the severity of these financial issues?
The strategy was straightforward minimization, just downplay everything. The lien was repeatedly referred to as a small, itty-bitty lien.
Itty-bitty.
Yes, almost infantilizing the severity of a public legal filing. Then they attempted to dismiss the entire affair as merely paperwork issues that, everybody faces.
The everybody does it defense.
Right, suggesting the scrutiny was disproportionate. And the overall claim, which was just ubiquitous across certain outlets, was that the story was being intentionally blown out of proportion.
And the source material draws a very strong connection here to an alleged political double standard.
It does. The analysis points out the striking contrast. If a minor infraction, even a missed parking ticket, were found against a high-profile Republican,
We all know what would happen.
certain cable news networks would dedicate significant airtime to questioning that individual's character and fitness for office. Nonstop coverage.
Yet, when Congresswoman Crockett has a publicly filed, month-overdue LAN, Clabe faces tens of thousands in limo spending questions, and Omar is under the shadow of a billion-dollar fraud network.
The initial response from many allies was silence and outright minimization. Sources suggest this containment strategy was deployed until independent reporting and, frankly, social media made the story impossible to ignore.
And when containment failed, Crockett herself executed that classic political defense maneuver.
She did. She labeled the entire exposure a right-wing smear and politically motivated harassment.
This is the political playbook at its most reflexive, isn't it?
It is. When you're facing verifiable facts, the easiest defense is to attack the motives of the accuser. However, the analysis highlights what was critically missing from this defense.
And what was that?
Documentation. There was no attempt to explain why the lien went unpaid. There was no effort to justify the extensive $75,000 in luxury spending. No transparent accounting of her personal finances to neutralize the claim.
It was pure deflection.
Pure deflection.
And why did that deflection fail so spectacularly in the court of public opinion?
Because the key facts are undeniable and they're easily verifiable. The public can go and access county records and see the land. The spending files are public FEC documents.
And the meltdown on camera is a viral video clip.
Exactly. The aggressive defensive meltdown is right there for everyone to see. So when she snapped back at reporters and blamed a right-wing smear, the response was counterproductive.
It made her look worse.
The visual evidence just suggested she was more guilty and more rattled because she was unable to dispute the core facts, only the interpretation of them.
This failure to control the narrative, according to the source material, it speaks to a broader shift in the political landscape, a perceived return of accountability that the legacy media can no longer entirely suppress.
That context is crucial for our deep dive. The analysis suggests that we are entering an era where voters and increasingly federal agencies are no longer just looking the other way when politicians demonstrate this level of fiscal irresponsibility.
So the analysis is that accountability is back.
That's the feeling, driven partly by voter fatigue and partly by increased scrutiny across the board.
It's the perception that after years of watching politicians mishandle money and dodge responsibility, the public's patience has simply run out.
It seems so.
And when Crockett's lens surfaced, it became a public test.
And according to the analysis presented in the sources, the Democratic faction failed that test spectacularly through a combination of evasion, denial, and demonstrated entitlement.
So the message being received in Washington is,
According to these sources, the message is simple. If you abuse or mishandle the public's trust, exposure and consequence are far more likely today than they were even a few years ago.
let's turn now to the concrete, career-altering consequences of this exposure. Before this scandal broke, we were hearing insider whispers about Congresswoman Crockett's ambitions.
Oh, she was absolutely positioning herself for a higher office. The whispers suggested she was eyeing a significant state run, potentially for the Senate or governor.
And she was actively trying to elevate her profile nationally as the next rising star of her faction.
She was. She was strategically using her prominence to build a brand based on this idea of uncompromising conviction.
So how have the unpaid lien and the documented luxury spending immediately impacted those ambitions?
The consequence is an immediate hard stop. Her political brand is now described internally as radioactive for any statewide bid.
Radioactive.
That's the word being used. Running for higher office requires massive fundraising and the support of the established party apparatus, both of which are contingent on a candidate's viability and their perceived integrity.
And strategists are now actively backing away. Explain the calculus there.
The calculus is brutal and simple. No one in the party apparatus wants to dedicate scarce resources, political capital, or high-dollar donor contributions to defending a candidate whose personal financial scandal is spiraling into a full squad-wide financial expose.
They just don't want to get near it.
They don't want to inherit the negative optics of the $3,000 limb, the $75,000 luxury spending, or the comparison to the previous Bowman collapse. Defense is expensive, it's distracting, and it's often futile when the facts are this clear.
So the reality is that this combination of factors, the personal debt, the massive spending, the viral meltdown, and the comparisons to financially reckless colleagues, has likely become the ceiling her political career hits.
It seems very likely.
Her viability, even for continued unanimous support in her current office, is now severely compromised.
It's a textbook example of how a failure in basic administrative responsibility can cascade into a complete political catastrophe. It really highlights that the ideological fervor that fueled her rise is just insufficient to overcome the appearance of financial hypocrisy.
Let's circle back for the final synthesis. We started with a $3,000 debt, and we've ended with a potential political wipeout. What is the final, overarching, systemic takeaway presented by the source material?
The final takeaway is that this is not seen as random, it's systemic. It confirms for many observers the existence of what analysts are calling the squad money pipeline.
And what is that?
It's a cycle where high-profile progressive messaging is paired with a demonstrated lack of financial discipline regarding campaign contributions.
So if we look across the entire faction, you have the collapse of Bowman due to ethics concerns and erratic behavior.
Right.
Tlaib exposed for significant unexplained limo spending.
Yes.
Omar facing questions about $1 billion fraud operating within her jurisdiction. And now Crockett with the unpaid personal debt contrasted with excessive donor-funded luxury travel.
The pattern is consistent. Money mismanaged, accountability ignored, and reflexive excuses recycled. The moment Crockett lashed out at reporters, the voters instantly connected these dots.
And this scandal, above all,
it confirms the suspicion that members of this specific group talk extensively about protecting the people while treating the very donor money given by those people like a personal luxury fund.
and that deep contrast between their progressive values and their exhibited conduct, that's what causes the deepest damage to public trust.
Absolutely.
The failure to be transparent on a simple condo bill is magnified exponentially when it's paired with receipts for five-star hotels and dedicated black car services paid for by constituents.
It suggests that for some, the cause is secondary to the comfort. Thank you, and thank you to our listeners.
That's all for this deep dive from News Focus podcast, but it leaves us with one haunting question. If the guardians of the rules are the first to break them, who is left to protect the game?